Dr. Bob, a little bit ago we were talking a bit about Zoroastrianism and its possible influence on Judaism. And so I'd like to ask you, what in the Old Testament, in the Jewish Bible, points you in the direction to a Persian origin, or at least influence, of the Jewish scriptures and these ideas that we find in Second Temple Judaism?
Well, I think though we wouldn't know what to do with this if this was all we had, in Ezra and Nehemiah, it's pretty clear that Ezra states overtly he was a Persian government official, though he was a Jew. But that's, one of many instances of Jews rising high in the countries in which they were deported, whatever. And he consolidates Judaism back in the Holy Land under the notion that we in the Persian Empire are your friends, and we're going to bankroll you rebuilding your temple, and we're organizing your scriptures for you. It says that Ezra came back to Judea with the law of God in his hand. And people wonder, what is that exactly? Is it the Pentateuch or what? And probably was. And then they have these local readings of it with guys with copies at podiums all over the place reading it out. No microphones, of course, so they're just with limited groups reading out the Torah. This seems to have been read back into the time of the mythical Moses, where he acquaints the people with the Torah and says, well, what do you say? Are you going to sign on for this and be the people of God? They said, yeah, okay. Originally, I think Orthodox Jews say Ezra was the second Moses, but in fact, it's more like Moses was the second Ezra. And I have to give it a Mosaic pedigree. Well, what was it that they imposed as official Judaism? It was something that the people that remained there, because it was only like the priestly and royal elite who were deported, right. The people that remained there, they didn't like what Ezra and Nehemiah promulgated, the Samaritans also. What was it that was so offensive to them? Well, of course, we don't know, and it's speculative, but I think there's good grounds to speculate that what the Persians and their agents did was to create a Judaized Zoroastrianism, which accounts for the fact that these major ideas that you find in so-called Second Temple Judaism have no precedent in even in the redacted Old Testament up to that time. It's not clear at all that there's even an afterlife in the earlier traditions, much less a resurrection of the dead. And you begin hearing about that in the book of Daniel, which is mid-2nd century BCE, and in the Isaiah Apocalypse, chapters 26 and thereabout in Isaiah, which are post-Alexander the Great. There you suddenly start hearing about resurrection from the dead. The change in the character of Satan, who earlier on is simply the Satan, the adversary, meaning he's the prosecuting attorney and the security chief. He questions the loyalty of God's favorites because he doesn't want God to be made a fool of. So he's Job. Hey, you ever seen my servant Job? He's pretty darn good, isn't he? Well, yeah, but come on, don't be naive. He gets all these fringe benefits from you. of course he's going to kiss your butt. And he says, well, all right, let's test that out. And the whole thing. And well, he's one of the sons of God. He's God's friend, not God's enemy. Yeah. And the same thing with David in the census and with the high priest Joshua later on. There's no hint of him being evil. And indeed, throughout the whole New Testament, he retains that character as God's champion. He tests, Jesus says at the Last Supper in Luke, Satan has demanded to sift you all as wheat. The disciples, well, what? He's demanding it? Well, it's his right because it's his job. Are these guys worthy of the dignity that Jesus is investing in them? Jesus meets Satan in the wilderness himself to be what? Tempted or tested, same word in Greek. How does he get there? The Spirit drives Jesus there. And so this business, if you're the Son of God, why don't you do this? You haven't eaten in a while. Why don't you, conjure up a pepperoni pizza? Well, not pepperoni, I guess, but, anchovies maybe. And so forth. He's testing him. In fact, the three temptations are based on the three temptations of Israel in the book of Deuteronomy. He's putting Jesus to the test, which he comes through with flying colors. Nothing about an evil devil there. Even the word devil, diabolos, is Greek for the hurler of aspersions and accusations, the accuser of our brethren. In Revelation, insofar as that's what he's doing, he's not bad. They overcome him because there's nothing to accuse them of. They're martyrs and all that stuff. And on it goes. How does Satan become evil, which he is in the New Testament and intertestamental literature, even though the original concept of Satan was so strong, it persisted alongside of that of the evil of Satan. Well, Satan in the Gospels becomes evil only once he's conflated with originally distinct characters. Beelzebul, who was the prince of demons, whom the exorcist would bind to his service and then force him to give up his property, which is just what Jesus says, right? You can't despoil a strong man unless you tie him up first. And so Jesus is giving the rationale as to why he does cast out demons by Beelzebul. He's not saying he doesn't. So even there, it's not what it sounds like, but someone has even there connected the two by making Jesus say, I think this is in Q, how could Satan cast out Satan? Why would he do it? Well, the rest of it doesn't say anything about Satan. It's Beelzebul, which is a whole different proposition. In the book of Revelation, he's conflated with Leviathan, the seven-headed dragon, who was God's primordial enemy, whom he slew as in dragons in Genesis. And so once he is conflated with Leviathan, okay, he's God's enemy. And where does Zoroastrianism come in? Well, the utility of having an evil anti-god. Zoroastrianism had this in the form of Ahriman. He was pretty much co-equal with Ahura Mazda, but because of his lack of foresight, he must eventually be defeated by the wise Lord Ahura Mazda. But until then, he's the anti-god. He's wicked. Well, Jews, this is part of Judaized Zoroastrianism. Hey, now we don't have to worry about how God could allow or even create evil, as it says he does in the Old Testament. He's beyond puny, mortal, good and evil. But they said, no. The idea of the holy was being moralized and rationalized. And so now it was problematic that God could be behind evil. And so this gave them a way out, they thought. hey, Zoroastrianism, there's two gods. One is evil, and that's all his fault. Oh, that's great. It gets Yahweh off the hook. Of course, it doesn't really, because they preferred monotheism, and so Satan is a created being, and so you still have to ask, how did God allow that? But they didn't pursue it that far. The periodization of history, that seems to be a Zoroastrian innovation. They had the whole thing worked out with the 4 periods of 12,000 years each, and they could tell you what would happen. And the idea of the Seoshians, or the benefactor, a future savior miraculously conceived from the sperm of Zoroaster, still living in a lake somewhere, and a virgin who bathes in it gets impregnated. So there's a virgin-born Messiah who will raise the dead at the final judgment. Do you have that in the earlier parts of the Old Testament? You do have a sacred king myth, but even that isn't quite like this. And so where the heck does all this come from? We know that the Jewish scribes were saying that let's see, I'm going to backtrack there, but I better not. That Baruch, the secretary of Jeremiah, was actually Zoroaster. I mean, that is astonishing. And of course, nobody would say that unless they were trying to graft Zoroastrianism into the Jewish tradition, which was the whole thing with Ezra. And what did and when you come up to the ostensible time of Jesus, where did the Jewish factions fall on this scale? Well, the Sadducees believed none of these things. No resurrection, no angels. Of course, there was this huge angelology that Zoroastrianism brought in. Suddenly, the Pharisees believed in it, but the Sadducees, what the hell? That's nonsense. And all this other stuff they wouldn't accept. You guys are not even Jews anymore. You're Zoroastrians. You're Parsees, Persians, and that's what Pharisees must have meant originally. But like with all these name game things, they eventually said, oh, no, it comes from Perushim. We're the separatists, the Puritans. And yeah, right. And so it seems to me to work out perfectly as an explanation that Christianity comes from Judaism, Zoroastrianism, and Islam from there. So if you didn't have this thing with Cyrus and Ezra and Nehemiah, there would be no Christianity, no Orthodox Judaism, and no Islam. I mean, it was world shaking when this happened, but that, I think, must be what happened.
Yeah. And then you come into some interesting parallels when you start looking at some of these biblical characters. Like you look at Zarathustra, and upon his birth, King Durin-Surum, heard a prophecy about this new king and needed to go and get rid of him as an infant. And so he goes into his house with a dagger. He tries to stab him, and then, Ahura Mazda comes down and withers his hand. So he drops the knife and he runs off. And so you have this divine intervention to save him from this mad king, which you have something very similar with Moses. And I think, these things, it seemed like a common trope at the time. We have it for Sargon. And
Cyrus and Augustus. Krishna.
Everyone in the Mediterranean world, was trying to be killed by some mad king at some point or another. And then, even later on, you have Zarathustra. He goes into the throne room at the very beginning of his ministry, and he tries to convert this king, and he has a showdown with his court magicians, and they're trying to heal a racehorse, the king's favorite racehorse, and it got sick, and the king really wants to race it, and the magicians, they can't heal it, and Zarathustra's like, the true god Ahura Mazda can do it, while your petty magic can't. And he shows up the court magicians, and where did we have something like this? Oh, well, Joseph does it in a scene that is very, very similar. And then Moses comes along, and he does it like 11 times in a row. Abraham even does it a couple of times, when he sells his wife to the Egyptian king, and then it does it later again with Abimelech, and then Isaac comes along and he does it again with Abimelech. So I think we have 15 times in the first two books of the Bible. And Daniel does it. And so it's like it just these Zoroastrian things, and maybe it didn't come from Zoroastrianism, but when you see these kinds of similarities, once you already recognize that these other Zoroastrian themes are present in the Old Testament, it's kind of hard to not ask the question, is Moses supposed to be similar to Zarathustra? Going up on a mountain and communing with God and then coming back with, the scripture to give to the people and start this teaching and,
baptism scene also. With a temptation following it.
And
eerily like it.
And then our fourth Ezra, where Ezra drinks the magic potion just like Zarathustra, and then he has a vision. He talks to Ahura Mazda / El Elyon, and he is then required to write down all of the scriptures to then give to the people to start the new one true religion. It's hard to look at these things and not see some kind of similarity. And considering you're looking at writings from a people that were ruled by the Persians, it's like
it's hard to
believe. And they're preaching in a temple that was built by the Persians. I mean, they're in a Persian temple. Come on.
It's like, what way down the street is it going? And don't get me wrong, I've said this before. Sure, there's been influence. Like Vikings maybe picked up Christian ideas and borrowed them. But then again, Vikings were savages. Name a kingdom where they were monarchs of entire empires, okay? What's the likeliness the Romans saw a Christian cult and said, yeah, let's really use this cult? It took hundreds of years of little here, little there, bumping into these guys for this thing to become like a Roman Empire religion. And I say that to say, which one's more likely? Which way is it flowing in the stream? Are the Jews really influencing all these places? Because a lot of apologists that are Jewish want to tell you, oh no, Jews influenced the Babylonians. If you find anything that's parallel to Babylon, Mesopotamia, whatever, they're just doing the apologist stuff that Christians do. Which came first? Chicken or the egg? Well, the Christian writings came first. They borrowed from the Christians. I mean, I'm not saying people didn't borrow from the Jews. I'm just saying Russell Gamirkin, when I brought up the whole Greek thing, he's like, which one's more likely? Yeah. And he brought that whole idea up. He says, listen, in the dating of the Hebrew Bible, he's like, that scholar's consensus is going to tell you the Greeks had the biggest influence on them rather than vice versa.
Yeah. And I think whenever, and I'm by no means an expert on this, but whenever I was looking at Zoroastrianism, it appeared to me, at least, that there was a great deal of gradual evolution in their stories, and like these ideas were things that they gradually struggled with and eventually came to because they were good solutions for these different philosophical problems that a new idea was creating, and when you see these things pop up in Judaism, it looks like someone just tried to shoehorn it in there, and then it causes this huge ripple effect where now people are having to try to reinterpret things in order to include this new theology, like the Satan character. They had this Satan character, and he was like Mike Ehrmantraut in Breaking Bad. He's just working for Gus Fring. He's running security and doing background checks and getting in people's way when they're trying to do something that Gus doesn't want. And then all of a sudden he's like the creator of all evil. How did this happen? I mean, Isaiah 45:7 contradicts that. It says that Yahweh made evil. Now you're saying that there's this thing that's almost as powerful as God. He can't quite beat him up. Well, that sounds like Otterman and Ahura Mazda. That doesn't sound like Yahweh and one of his employees who doesn't even have a name. That's just his job title. You know, it's like, hey, accuser, go do this thing for me. And he's like, yes, sir. And he runs off and does it. That's the great cosmic evil that Yahweh has been struggling with for thousands of years. Like, how do you get that out of scripture? And so, yeah, it just doesn't seem like this originated in Judaism. I'm trying to figure out where it would come from, because I've read the Old Testament and it just doesn't fit. It's not in there.
Yeah, even where people think it is, it isn't. Like with Isaiah 14, Halal, son of Shahar, that has nothing to do with the devil, with Satan. It's a Canaanite god, the morning star, the planet Venus. It was an astrological or astronomical story explaining the relative prominence of heavenly bodies in the morning and all that. And Ezekiel 28, that seems to be about Adam being expelled from Eden. Right. The serpent in Eden in Genesis, if anything, that's based on Nehushtan or Leviathan, the divine serpent worshipped in the temple. And so
like Numbers 21, I believe, is mentioned in there.
And so that's already the same kind of thing they did in Revelation by making Satan and Leviathan the same thing. But that's what they had to do. And I think you first hear of Satan, his name reflecting evil, in the Secrets of Enoch, or Slavonic Enoch, or Second Enoch, where he's not just called Satan, but Sathaniel, the adversary of God. Yeah. Because Satan by itself doesn't have to mean that. Yeah. So you can kind of trace the stages of this.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed the podcast. Hit that like button, share this with a friend, and join our Patreons. It helps us grow. It really does. There's also one-time donation options. Just go down in the description. You'll see what I mean. Love you guys.